So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well as many types of religious Jews.
It's Saturday night.
Is it? I hope not.
No.
Because then I lost an entire day of my life.
Me too. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Preston.
Man, it's spooky time.
The spookiest of the spooky, just
Right.
in time for Halloween
Right?
or Halloween.
The spooky season. We've got about a week left of it. And this is our last spooky season episode for now.
On
The Holy Watermelon Podcast.
I was going to say it's actually on Exorcism. But I like how you brought our intro in because I didn't know.
We're here now.
I didn't know what I was going to do after that. So, so today we're talking about exorcisms or demonic possession and getting rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
We put a trigger warning in our notes.
Some of these get a little gross.
Some of these feel a little gross, and there's some abuse stuff later on, which I'll remind another trigger warning right before then. But just keep that in mind as we dive into spooky ooky things. Ooky spooky things.
Spooky, scary skeletons.
So what the heck even is exorcism?
Oh, man. It's kind of a big, heavy thing. Broadly speaking, an exorcism is the act of removing demons or jinns or malevolent spirits or spiritual entities from a person. Or sometimes a place, a group of people, a amalgam body. We'll see some weird examples of that.
Oh, I'm excited. So being in a Western country, we mostly hear about exorcisms from a Christian and a predominantly Catholic perspective. But it is an ancient practice that can be found all over the world and across basically every religion. We have examples from most major religions.
Yeah, it's almost universal, I guess. It seems to be connected to this ancient primal fear that we have in us that there's something that we need to get rid of. It's an odd thing to observe in our species.
It is. And then part of me wonders how that feeling links to sin, but that's a different episode.
Yeah,
Just
I think
feeling
it
like
is.
there's always something inherently wrong with us.
Right.
Anyway.
So the interesting thing about exorcism is that the word actually means to administer an oath. To exercise something is to make somebody bound in an obligation. And the word actually isn't connected to exhortation like I initially suspected it was when I went looking for the definition. Even though that would have made sense as you're exhorting the demon to say, I'm gone. But no, it's more of actually causing this unpleasant entity to enter into an agreement to willingly leave, which is kind of interesting.
It really is. It's, we see it about like casting out, but you're right. It's really like more of a bargaining than a termination of a lease.
Right.
I found a quote in the Atlantic, from the Atlantic News website, on the frequency of exorcisms. And so this one pastor by the name of Thomas, this is a quote. It says, most of the exorcists I interviewed said they believed that demonic possession was becoming more common, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they cited a resurgence in magic, divination, witchcraft, and attempts to communicate with the dead as a primary cause. According to Catholic teaching, engaging with the occult involves accessing parts of the spiritual realm that may be inhabited by demonic forces. Those practices become the engine that allows the demons to come in. And I want to bring this up early in the episode because we just finished our occult episode, and before that we did Wicca. And Wicca actually both of them, I just don't really know how there is any opportunity for the demons to come in. Wicca doesn't deal with demons at all. The occult, if you get into seances, that might be a bit of a gray area, but alchemy doesn't deal with demons at all.
No, not so much.
So I just thought it was interesting that I guess the misinformation.
A lot of fundamentalist Christians, and actually a lot of non-fundamentalist Christians as well, I suppose, really are connected to this idea that if you're into any of these dark religions that these Christians are happy to label as such, you have either made a decision to deviate from Christianity or have been tricked by the devil into this awful tradition. It's kind of a weird position to hold.
Well, again, it's a weird position to me when, we just talked about the occult being astrology and alchemy, and
There's so much to it.
There's so much to it, but those are the ones that stand out because, again, they don't have to do anything to do with spirits or demons or anything at all. And then Wicca, again, they have the god and the goddess. And that's kind of the extent of their belief in supernatural. And some Wiccans don't even believe in that.
Right.
So, anyway, I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit for this.
Yeah, it's an interesting quotation. Christians generally believe that there is an ultimate good and that it's personified in God and Jesus. And so necessarily the reciprocal must exist in the form of demons, the devil, and all evil. It's relatively easy to spot in the Bible, and it gets built on a lot more with theological thought over the last 2,000 years, for sure. And there's this idea that a person who has been possessed is not considered to be evil. They're a victim. They're basically meant to be treated as though they have an illness that needs to be cured, rather than this person who needs to be destroyed. Which, so far, sounds like a healthy-ish perspective.
I mean, they're all healthy-ish perspectives, but we'll get into that ish part later. So exorcisms look a little different from denomination to denomination. And again, we mostly see it from a Catholic perspective if you watch The Exorcist or watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Those
or
are all
any of the exorcism movies.
They're all predominantly Catholic exorcism. So in Catholicism, exorcists are a specially group of trained priest seals. I'm kidding. It's a bad joke. Like Navy SEALs.
Or.
I know. I was like, I hope that it didn't translate, did it?
Oh, it did.
You're just making. Okay.
Even when people talk about Navy SEALs, I think of uniformed
SEALs.
Weird animals that should not be trusted with military duties.
They caught Osama bin Laden, right?
Yeah. That was ages ago.
Yeah. So it's a special group of ordained priests. So not every priest in the Catholic Church can perform exorcisms. There's like an annual course to train exorcists.
Yeah, it seems that since we have more and more need for exorcisms, that they just have opened it up a lot more that, hey, more priests need this training.
But again, your local parish priest might not actually be an exorcist.
Right, and we'll talk about one of those a little later on too.
Oh dear. So again, in the Catholic tradition, we'll talk about other Christian traditions and then other traditions. Predominantly, the prayer to Saint Michael is believed to be the strongest prayer against the devil. And that's they used to out damn spot.
Right. Michael's powerful, but so is the devil, apparently.
I guess so.
Yeah. Orthodox Christians believe that objects, in addition to people, can become possessed. And unlike the Catholic tradition, all Orthodox priests are trained to perform exorcisms because the need, if even objects can be possessed, that need is going to be a little bit more frequent.
Yes. I also, this is just me off the top of my head, I don't know how big the Orthodox tradition is compared to the Catholic tradition. Right.
Population-wise, it is smaller.
Yeah, so if you have fewer priests because you have fewer congregants, then there's a higher need to make sure your priests are trained.
Oh, yeah. Most Christian denominations performing exorcisms are required to get physical and psychological evaluations done before going forward with an exorcism, which seems like a pretty good
This is
idea.
that healthy-ish again, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
But
It's important to make sure that you're not dealing with totally separate underlying conditions rather than, ignore something that's easy to fix with pharmacology or medical attention.
yes, because whether you believe in possession or not, I imagine an exorcism is quite traumatizing to go through.
In every situation that I've found, there is a fight.
Right? So,
Sometimes it's a light fight, but there's some sort of fight.
yeah. They need a stronger prayer.
Yeah.
So just another note to reiterate is that in the last several centuries, many Christians have been blaming possessions on the increase of witchcraft. And so I actually searched possession rates for Wiccans to see if Wiccans have ever reported possession by a demon, and I couldn't find anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, to believe that you are possessed does require a pre-existing belief that it is possible.
Yes, and when we get into sort of the atheist perspective and the skepticism around exorcisms, that's absolutely something that will come up, is that this doesn't happen to people who don't believe in demons.
Or maybe they just don't recognize it.
Maybe. Okay.
But to believe that you've been possessed by a demon, you have to believe that it's possible.
Possible, yeah.
That's how belief works.
Please see our previous episode on belief.
Yep. All right. King James, the same guy who authorized the English translation of the Bible for the Church of England back in 1611-ish, was responsible for a book called Demonology, which outlined the relationship between demons and witches to help Christians cleanse their communities, and ultimately his goal was to cleanse the nation, which definitely didn't go so beautifully.
Yeah. That's
King James was an interesting
just
fella.
gonna say, like, randomly killing off your citizens doesn't feel like a good economic choice.
But it wasn't just about economics. He was the defender of the faith, and he
guess so.
absolutely needed to ensure the salvation of his nation. He was a lot more concerned about that than economics.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Reminds me of some more people that we've seen more recently.
So, interestingly enough, exorcism is in all sorts of religions. So, exorcism in Islam, I actually found super interesting. Mostly when we get into jinn.
Yeah, so exorcisms, they're called azaim or rugia, basically means healing. And there's nothing in the Quran about exorcism, but there are mentions of it in the Hadith. And there is a record that Muhammad drove out an evil spirit from a young boy. So it is part of that religious tradition. And jinns are pretty nifty.
Yes, so jinn are spirits, so it's a big umbrella term. So jinn are not necessarily evil. There's a whole bunch of other terms I'm going to run through. But I got really excited about jinn and spirits, and then I thought about Aladdin and the term genie, which is absolutely where we get
That's where the word
the
comes
word
from.
comes from. And I had my little own personal Preston Weird moment. I got really excited about making that connection. So if you want to picture a jinn, picture good old Robin Williams, because jinn are described in the Quran as being made of smokeless and scorching fire.
It's pretty awesome. So it's a little bit weird that we have this blue, almost entirely smoky Robin Williams.
Yes. He's very wispy.
Yeah. Not the most true to source material genie,
Well,
but definitely a lot of fun.
the wispy is, I think,
Yeah,
what we're
wispy's
going for.
fair. Yeah. He had
And
a tail instead of
he
legs
needed to be
a lot of the
friendly,
time.
too. So the blue.
Yeah.
He needed to be friendly.
Disney's color scheme at the time was definitely red and green are evil, blue and purple are friendly.
Right?
Yeah,
And then he turns into Red Genie later.
he does.
So, can't have him starting out that way. Jinn is derived from the root Arabic word jan, which conveys the idea of concealing or veiling. So again, that kind of wispy,
A mysterious
visual.
figure.
Yes. So then there are a whole bunch of other Arabic terms. You have Shaitan, which are satanic beings. You have Marid is the demon. Boot is an evil spirit. A Farista is an angel. So that falls under the jinn umbrella as well.
Yeah, and so when it comes to dealing with an exorcism, a sheik places his hands on the head of the possessed person and recites verses from the Quran. And hopefully this is going to be enough to get rid of these spirits that are traditionally very obedient to Allah, which is kind of a perk,
Yeah, that's good. I mean, as they should be if Allah created them.
right? In the Christian tradition, they don't tend to be terribly obedient.
No.
They really put up a fight, and we see a little bit of difference here between religious traditions.
So I just wanted to clarify because we didn't actually talk about what a sheikh was in
our Islam episode.
Our Islam episode. So a sheikh is just the head of a household or some sort of leader. So you could be a community leader, you could be the head of your family household. Yeah, those are kind of the two big ones that I can think of.
You could be the leader of a mosque.
Yeah. So we do talk about imams, and they're leaders of prayer. So if you're getting it down into the semantics, you're only an imam when you are leading prayer. So the second you're done leading prayer, you are no longer an imam, is how I read the definition.
I feel like there's a little bit of variety there from one group to the next.
Like that's probably a job title for a lot of people as well. So yes, you can be both a sheikh and an imam. And so yeah, it just needs to be a head of a household.
Or other group.
To help cast out these jinn.
Judaism also deals with this sort of issue. Demons are pretty often called dibuk, which is a shorter form of dibuk merua ra'a, which means clinging evil spirit. And so when we cut it down to just dibuk, as is often done, it's basically just calling them Klingons.
Which I love.
There's actually a lot of sweet little Jewish Easter eggs in Star Trek.
Is there?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
And yeah, some good fun there. The Dibuk are believed to be the lost souls of the dead rather than any other sort of spiritual being. They're said to take bodies to accomplish some sort of task. So if they're going to perform a possession, they are hoping to accomplish something, and then they will just leave on their own. Unless, of course, an exorcist gets there first.
Which I guess, depending on what they want to accomplish, might be a good thing, especially if they want to accomplish murder.
That would be a good reason to call an exorcist before that gets accomplished.
Any unfinished business on earth.
Right. And it's not usually like, oh, I gotta file my taxes.
No, if I died, I'd leave that for my estate.
That's not a thing I enjoyed doing in my life. It's not the way I'm going to spend my death.
Yeah.
A Jewish exorcist is usually a rabbi trained in Kabbalist rituals, and they operate with the assistance of ideally 10 men in a circle around the person who is possessed. And the exorcist must purify himself according to Jewish ritual practices. And what I thought was interesting, because words, that's my thing, the group of men that help out the rabbi is called a minyan, which sounds an awful lot like the word minion in English, but of course we can't have an army of little yellow dudes.
Out, spirit!
Just shouting banana.
Banana!
So the word minyan means count or number or quorum, so nothing terribly fancy there. But they will have many minions.
I love that.
Maybe. I like the word. I'm happy I found it.
I'm happy that you're happy.
Right? So sometimes smoking out the demon is necessary. Sometimes that means wood smoke or sulfur, with the end goal, of course, being able to learn the name of the demon and then have a conversation with it.
Do you know how they know if a exorcism has been successful?
How do they do?
So you can find the body, there's a part of your body where the spirit will leave from. So it is often a bloody toenail or a fingernail, and the spirit will just pew out of there. There are some reports of more gruesome exit wounds, But that's how you know the demon's gone.
I feel like when you say the most common exit wound is evidenced by a bloody toenail, I feel like somebody probably kicked something real hard while they're putting up this fight.
Oh, probably. Which makes the gruesome ones more gruesome.
Right? That's
So we're talking about
a
like
little messy.
genital wounds and neck
Ooh.
wounds. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Could you imagine a little demon shooting out of your penis? Pew!
That's not what I'm imagining. What I'm
Oh.
imagining is abuse that's being written off as an exit wound.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's a real problem.
I mean, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in this. So yeah, probably. But just imagine a little genie. Pew!
Yeah.
It's funnier.
It is funnier. It's a lot funnier.
You gotta make light of a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make a graphic for that.
Aladdin rubbing his lamp.
Wow. This is why there's a trigger warning on it, just because we're gross people. Oh dear. So we've never talked about Taoism on the podcast yet.
Not really.
We have exorcisms too.
Yeah.
So Taoism is a Chinese folk religion. It's kind of parallels with Shintoism.
It has a lot in common with Shintoism, but I feel like there's more to it in some ways.
I would agree, but it is sort of the indigenous religion of China.
Yeah.
So actually, very similar to Judaism, it is mostly concerned about ghosts of the dead taking over bodies of the living.
Yeah. Sometimes a person is said to use magic to deliberately put a spirit into somebody. And of course, this accusation is made against the witches by Christians and stuff too. So it's, again, not terribly foreign to the things we've talked about before.
The process of exorcism is also quite similar to what we've seen before. So it's the ritual spells, casting with written symbols, as well as chanting.
Yeah, pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
All right. In Hinduism, demons are called asuras, and they can be pretty nasty, as I guess they get to be in most traditions, I suppose. But praying to Hanuman gets you the best results for exorcism. Apparently, it's after centuries, or thousands of years even, they just figured, oh, this one aspect of the all god, this one aspect is really good at doing this job.
I mean, it's kind of like the prayer to St. Peter. How many prayers did they try to know that this one was the most effective?
Right.
So yes, Hanuman is your guy for that.
And Hindu medical tradition, the Ayurveda that we've talked about before, includes Bhuta Vidya, which specifically deals with helping possessing demons just chill out.
Just to relax.
Yeah. And then, of course, once they're chilled out,
You can
it's a lot easier to get rid of
escort
them.
them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, I guess, yeah, I have been hurting this person. Bye.
I feel like this is the most peaceful exorcism of all of them.
So far, based on the details that we've picked out here, maybe cherry picking a little bit, yeah.
I mean, also just the information available. It kind of goes in the order we've talked about. There's a whole bunch on Christian exorcisms.
Yeah.
And then for Buddhism, they don't actually really deal with malicious demons, but Buddhist monks can be called upon to dispel negative energy.
Which is kind of as close as we get to an exorcism there.
Yeah. So, what about me, Preston? Let's make this about me.
Sure.
I'm kidding. What if you don't even believe in this? What is actually happening here if you don't believe that demons are real?
Well, if you don't believe demons are real, you're certainly not going to believe that you're experiencing a possession. That's doesn't even make sense.
Right. So, demonic possession is not recognized as a mental illness.
Right?
But symptoms of possession can be similar to hysteria, mania, psychosis, Tourette's, epilepsy, schizophrenia, or dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. You can also have something called monomania, which is kind of like hypochondria. So if you truly believe you're possessed by a demon, you will start to manifest the symptoms of demon possession. So we know the human mind is super powerful. We've barely scratched the surface on brain science. And we know that even from our belief episode, perception is reality. So if you think you're possessed by a demon, you're possessed by a demon.
Right? We talked about this in our voodoo episode, that if you are made into a zombie or made to believe that you are made into a zombie, there's so much social pressure that and your own belief system that you've internalized, that if you believe that somebody has turned you into a zombie, there's no reason not to behave the way you've been taught that zombies exist.
Yeah.
It's a weird feedback loop in culture.
It really is, because it's like, yeah, I can understand how your brain, again, if you think you're possessed, therefore you are possessed, but that doesn't mean demons exist either. You know what I mean?
It's tricky.
Yeah, right? Historically, possessions have become, there's been an uptick recently in possessions, but historically, possessions have become less common as medical understanding has improved. We know what schizophrenia is. We know what bipolar disorder is. We know what dissociative identity disorder is. But as the rare possessions do hit the news and made their way into popular culture, possessions in North America increased a whole bunch right around the time The Exorcist came out, the 60s and 70s. And this is also when we see a big influx of even New Age or alternative religion as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of hit in that counterculture sweet spot, which is just weird. Everything about our culture got real weird for a little while.
I wonder if possessions also increased sort of as like the death throes of Christianity. You know what I mean? Not that the Christianity's gone anywhere, but like there was this sort of idealism of the 50s and the 2.5 kids and a dog and a white picket fence and everyone went to church. And it was, I wonder if the possession was like a death throes where it's like, no, look, it is real. And because you're now doing yoga and smoking peyote, look what's happening. You know what I mean?
I think I follow you.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case or not, but it'd be interesting to look further into.
I am absolutely just spitballing. So. One thing I did look into for my own welfare is, are there any claims or cases of atheists being possessed by a demon? And I couldn't find any. But
You're just asking the wrong people about those cases.
Probably, because then I found the really offensive belief is that atheists are inherently possessed by a demon because they do not believe in God. That was when I read.
That's a really weird position to try and force on people.
And then the other one, I guess it's kind of similar, is that your body is a vessel, and if it's not filled with Jesus, it is filled with Satan. So those were two really moderately offensive ones.
That's not okay.
Okay, thank you. What's your Christian take on it?
My Christian take on it?
I mean, you said it was gross.
I don't believe that there is any empty vessel that's walking around.
Well, you can't be empty. You're filled with Jesus or you're filled with Satan.
But there's so many other options, like your own spirit, your own life.
We don't have those. We're atheists. We don't have those.
You've got electricity and blood coursing through your body that help manipulate your identity as you experience life. So there's something.
Okay.
And that's just the stuff that's easy to prove.
So this is from that same Atlantic article, and this is Pastor Thomas again. And okay, trigger warning time. This is quote, nearly every Catholic exorcist I spoke with cited a history of abuse, in particular sexual abuse, as a major doorway for demons. Mm-hmm. Thomas said that as many as 80% of the people who come to him seeking an exorcism are sexual abuse survivors. According to these priests, sexual abuse is so traumatic, true, that it creates a soul wound and makes a person more vulnerable to demons. So I have some problems with this.
What problems do you have with it?
This is your sassy comment that you should probably read aloud.
So I'm this idea that sexual abuse is tightly connected to this experience of possession immediately brought to mind the idea that maybe that's why we see so many Catholics suffering from possessions.
Ooh, shady.
Because
but
we
true.
have a embarrassingly large statistic number of priests who are having a real hard time keeping their vows of chastity and sexual, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't diddle kids.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't care about the chastity as long as there's consent. Do not diddle children.
Right?
So
Yeah.
my thing is, I don't think it creates a soul wound. I think being sexually abused is trauma, and you're probably having a trauma response that people are then saying is possession.
Well, if your soul is your psyche, then that is a soul wound.
Right.
But it's not necessarily a wound through which something else enters. It's a wound in itself,
Exactly.
at the very least.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a problem. So in some parts of Europe, and necessarily following that, the European diaspora, demonic possessions have been connected to hysteria, which is, if you know a lot about your medical history, a made-up disorder that was treated most ineffectively with sexual abuse. So if these treatments failed, then you obviously had a demon, was the perspective they had.
Or you'd been sexually abused.
Right? It's such a disaster. And we've come a long way in our medical understanding, and that's great.
Yes. Also creepy and really weird on this same vein is that possessions are more common in women and marginalized groups.
Mm-hmm.
And spirits, this is something I read, spirits are more likely to be male than female. So I had two concerns that you need to comment on. One, it's kind of weird to me that we're gendering our demons.
I think an awful lot of religions are, and if they're interested in spirits, do recognize a difference of some kind between male and female, whether they're the departed dead who had a gender in life that is more easy to discern, or if there's something else about them that feels familiar to what we see in life.
And then number two, what does this say about gender roles and how we treat marginalized groups in society?
You mean most people that hurt other people are male?
Preston, no.
Not that there aren't women who are abusive, but we hear an awful lot more about male abusers.
But yeah, this sounds to me like possession and trauma go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. They definitely seem to be connected.
All right, so the DSM-5, and this is I recently learned about the DSM-5. It's the go-to manual for identifying mental health disorders. It's a mental health dictionary, if you will. It does list dissociative trance disorder as a mental health condition, which is defined as a single or episodic alteration in the state of consciousness characterized by the replacement of customary sense of personal identity by a new identity. This is attributed to the influence of a spirit, power, deity, or other person.
So possessions are in the medical dictionary as far as people self-diagnosing and then, oh, no, this is actually what's happening.
Yes. Yes.
That's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a more specific type of monomania, really.
Sure, yeah.
Or even potentially a very specific type of dissociative identity disorder.
I get you.
So anyway, so that is interesting.
It is.
It is a medical condition, I guess. So I guess the conclusion that we're not done yet, but is that possessions are real? Question mark. That's my.
I wanted to look at a few specific examples of possessions and exorcisms throughout history, mostly just the last 100 or so years. There's some gooders that I think are fun to look at.
I always enjoy these stories.
So the first one I pulled up is from 1906 in South Africa. A 16-year-old orphan girl named Clara Germana Seal confessed to her priest that she was possessed after having made a pact with the devil.
Cool.
Right.
I hope she got something good out of it.
One would hope. I don't think she did, though. Nuns reported that she could mysteriously speak a wide variety of languages that they could recognize but not explain. Like, one of them was Polish. There's not a lot of Polish in South Africa.
Not in 1906. Nope.
But theoretically, I mean, maybe this deal with the devil, she really wanted to talk to this one person she couldn't. Maybe
she wanted to be a hyper polyglot so she could say she's a hyper polyglot.
Maybe. She was also reportedly able to describe the sins of strangers, and she had incredible strength. So, describing sins of strangers, pretty easy guess. Say, father of the parish touches himself. You know what? Probably.
I was just going to say, if you just accuse everyone of masturbation, you're going
to be right most of the time.
Sinner!
She's also said to occasionally float about 5 feet above the ground. So, no small amount there. Kind of a big deal.
No, yeah.
And also sometimes turn into a snake. So, what? That's insane.
Why are there no photos of this?
It's 1906.
There were photos in 1906.
South Africa was a pretty, relatively speaking, poor country at this time. So there would have been cameras around, but probably not lots.
But wouldn't you want to, if I had a camera, I'd go find a snake girl.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
After she'd confessed this to her priest, there was an exorcism that lasted 2 days for this girl. And after trying to choke out the priest, Clara was declared healed. She lived for only 6 more years, dying of heart failure at the age of 22. So whatever she got from the devil, it wasn't a long-term prize.
No, that's too bad. 1949 America. Probably one of the most famous exorcisms of all time. An anonymous 14-year-old boy, now typically referred to as Rolando, was the inspiration.
Was this priest also a baker?
Literally, I'm watching Schitt's Creek and I laugh about Roland shit all the time.
Right.
Rolando. Excuse me. Now typically referred to as Rolando, was the inspiration for Peter Blady's famous novel, The Exorcist, of course. Interestingly enough, one of the attending priests, Father Walter H. Halloran, refused to go on record saying whether the boy was truly possessed. Many of the details align closely with what you have seen in the movie or read in the book. Flying objects, shaking bed, guttural noises, an aversion to anything holy, etc.
Yeah. So the little bit of looking I did into this particular exorcism, the record that the priests did offer is almost exactly what made it into this book, but the forensic evidence and other non-clerical witnesses were like, nah, man, that's all crap.
Right.
That's not how it went down.
Yeah, and then in subsequent interviews, he wouldn't say if the boy was actually possessed. So,
which is really weird.
Especially because that's like your job.
Right. Oh, well. All right. A little more recently, 1974.
This one's wild.
Right. A fella named Michael Taylor started spending a bunch of time with the leader of their prayer fellowship, Marie Robinson. It wasn't long before Mike's wife called them out in a crowded prayer meeting.
Adultery.
Yeah, exactly. She was pretty stressed out about their relationship. And Mike freaked out and started shouting gibberish and attacking Marie, for which he was forgiven the next day, thankfully, I guess. But Mike's behavior only got worse, and the local vicar was called to perform an exorcism. The Anglican priest teamed up with a Methodist elder to get the job done. They decided that Mike had dozens of demons in him, and in an all-night ritual, they cast out a whole bunch, individually, one after the other, instead of, a mass exorcism to get rid of the scores of demons in him. Kind of a weird choice, but whatever. That's what they did.
I mean, they were probably really tough demons, Preston.
Probably. I mean,
they were making him cheat on his wife.
Everybody in the record that I found, refused to say that he was actually sleeping with Marie. But there was definitely some doubt. Anyway, they're casting out demons one by one, and unfortunately they got tired before they could be bothered to cast out the demons of insanity and murder.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So they let him go home to his wife so that they could, sleep it off and get some rest, feel better, and then start again the next day. And Michael Taylor went home, strangled and disfigured his wife and their poodle.
Not their poodle.
Yeah. Before he was found naked and covered in blood, just chilling out in the street.
I wouldn't want to be that cop. I
Right?
would not want to be that beat cop. Just like a guy covered naked with his wiener hanging out, covered in blood. I would
Right?
not.
No.
I'd drive by and I'd wait for another beat cop to drive by. This is why I'm not a cop.
Yeah, that's a scary, uncomfortable situation. So unfortunately, Mike was acquitted based on grounds of insanity. Because they didn't dispel the demon of insanity, so he got off on an insanity plea.
Where were the priests to be like, maybe we shouldn't let him off? Or maybe they were like, let him off because it's just an insanity demon. We'll take care of it. Anyway.
But, the murder demon's still there too. So, problems. He only spent 4 years in hospital, which, only 4 years. That's a long time in hospital, but also apparently not long enough.
Oh.
He has since been convicted for indecent conduct with a minor.
So they didn't dispel the kitty diddling demon either.
Right. Problems. Lots of
Yeah.
oversight. There's some things you should have started with.
Yeah, right? Murder and kitty diddling for sure should have been the first to go.
Right.
Because like a harmless insane person is just pitiable.
Right. Yeah. Good old Michael Taylor. His story is a little bit more complex than this, a little bit more interesting if you want to look him up later.
All right. Panama in 2020.
Recent stuff.
Very recent. A few villagers ran to a hospital for help after escaping an exorcism ritual that ended up with the death of a woman and 5 of her young children, as well as a teenage girl that lived next to them. The escapees told the authorities that their captors intended to kill them if they didn't give up their demons and repent their sins. So this is not a voluntary exorcism.
It's such a short list of voluntary exorcisms.
Well, I guess that depends on who, if you think you're talking to the person or not. Because
yeah,
little Linda Blair knew something was wrong with her.
Sure.
I don't think she wanted to be exorcised if she could have avoided it.
Right.
But this sounds basically like kidnapping or human trafficking and then some weird
Yeah.
exorcism
And now you're going to
ritual.
obey me or be killed.
Yeah.
It's kind of messed up.
Yeah, very messed up.
All right. Just this year, 2021, Washington, D.C., Reverend David Fulton, a Catholic priest serving a couple of parishes in rural Nebraska, decided that he needed to participate in the terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol that happened January 6th of this year. He told reporters on the scene that day that he had performed an exorcism on the Capitol because a demon had taken hold of Congress.
Was it a demon or just a bunch of hillbillies?
Some people have a hard time telling the difference.
That's a problem.
It is a problem. The Archdiocese of Omaha has since rebuked him because he has not, in fact, attended the annual training of how to be an exorcist.
So he didn't know what he's doing. Did he know about the prayers for St. Michael?
No, probably not.
Probably not.
He hasn't received the training, and he showed up in his work clothes, which was called a misuse of his ministry that misrepresented the Church of Rome.
That one's wild.
And did his exorcism succeed? I'm going to say probably not.
Was there anything to even exorcise?
Well, the demon that broadly controls the whole of Congress, or even a majority of it, just doesn't make any sense
Maybe the
theologically.
building was possessed.
Maybe?
Physical building.
I mean, demons can exist in spaces, I guess, depending on your theology. Who knows what his real goal was?
We have one more story is from Bobby Jindal, who was the governor of Louisiana from 2008 to 2016. And I just want to point out that this is not slander. He's told this story himself.
Yeah.
Though I don't know why, because it makes him look like a horrible person. So the famously homophobic and gynophobic Jindal was baptized Catholic while attending Brown University, and he quickly showed a dangerous level of zeal. Jindal noticed that his friend Susan was acting differently, usually exhibiting a sullen mood. He decided to get his friends from the Campus Crusade for Christ, I already have a problem with that,
Hoorah!
to help out with an exorcism. Like a bunch of 18-year-old boys were like, let's exorcise a girl. This is already a problem.
Right?
Oh God, it gets worse. They restrained her. Remember, a bunch of college-age boys, and pushed Bibles and crosses in her face, offended by her scream profanities and her efforts to escape. So it turns out, Preston, Susan was tired and sullen and acting differently because she was going through cancer treatments as a university. I mean, cancer's shitty anyway, but to be that young and going to university and going through cancer treatments.
That would suck. You'd be tired.
And it turns out Jindal is just a dick.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you see the way he behaved as governor, I mean, it fits.
I mean, I wouldn't be his friend anymore.
No. Ew. I wouldn't be his friend either.
So yeah, that one's really yucky, actually. That's assault.
Yeah, it really is.
That one, trigger warning.
Yeah.
Post trigger warning on that one, because that's assault. So.
Yeah. So there does seem to be a few different kinds of possessions. You can have somebody who is sick and actually needs medical attention, but instead gets mistreated, like we just talked about.
Yeah.
Or you could have somebody who is unpopular and becomes the victim of abusive rituals.
Like the Panama one.
Right? Just messed up. Or sometimes you can have somebody who is acting out for attention and ends up getting what they want and maybe a little bit more, like Clara.
And actually, they think Roland Doe was one of those as well.
I think you're probably right. The weird thing is that these claims of having some undesired life force in the body are medically reasonable. If something is inside your brain that makes it hard to live the way you would normally do, that could be a brain tumor. It could be a fever, viral, bacterial, who knows, whatever. There's all kinds of illnesses that are things in your body that shouldn't be there. And if you believe that living things have spirits, then there is an extra spirit in your body. But we also have an awful lot of gut bacteria that is also that same sort of issue, but benign.
Is it sentient?
Probably not. But these things can affect people's lives. And definitely see a doctor.
Always see a doctor. And you know what? Always get a second opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Always. Yeah, and I would sort of piggyback off that and say, like, we know so much more about mental illness, and that belief in your brain are super, super powerful. So absolutely, like, if you think you can be possessed by demons and you think you're possessed by a demon, then yeah, you're absolutely, I'd say you're manifesting that. But if you believe
It's
that's
the
true, you
secret.
believe that's right. Wow, Preston. You're not wrong. Ray, like, I couldn't convince you otherwise that it's all in your head. So
Right. It's all tricky stuff. And the interesting thing is that anciently, like going back 3,000 years, all of your medically literate people, for like 99% of the time, were your religious leaders, your priests and whatnot. But today, there are very few religious leaders that are medically literate.
there's very little overlap.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so see a medical doctor, and if your problems can't be solved, I don't know how to help that.
It's a really great message to end
I've been asked to perform one exorcism ever, and before she asked us to perform an exorcism for her, she did say, "Hey, I also have schizophrenia," and so kind of talked her out of that, and we did not perform an exorcism.
Because you realized it wouldn't work on schizophrenia.
Right.
Good. But you know what does work on schizophrenia?
Medication.
Medication.
See a doctor.
See a
That's
doctor.
that's the thesis of this whole thing.
See a doctor, and generally don't be afraid of demons, but do enjoy The Exorcist this week or something ooky spooky.
Yeah. Enjoy the spooky season. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the podcast.
You know what else
What's that?
our listeners can enjoy?
What?
They can enjoy our Discord.
Absolutely.
They can enjoy our social media.
Yeah.
They can enjoy our Patreon.
Ooh, and we have merch.
And we have merch. They can enjoy our merch. So while you're watching The Exorcist, go online and do all that to help support the podcast.
And it defends the state of
Peace be with you.
salvation for
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.